Hello and welcome to another of these tier list videos we have been going through from the first Doctor all the way through, and we have reached the 12th Doctor, which I need to preface this video by saying that Peter Capaldi is my favourite Doctor. So if you're here to see this era get torn to pieces like on some YouTube channels and to slag it off and tell you that it's got the worst companions and the worst writing and the arcs are terrible at best, then you might want to switch off now, because you'll be getting none of those cliches here. The most frustrating argument that I see on the internet is this idea that Capaldi was a good Doctor with bad writing. No, he was a phenomenal Doctor with frequently exceptional writing. He doesn't have as many amazing stories as Smith or Tennant, but I think his era is much more consistent than either of those two. Series 8, 9, and 10, I love all three of them. And actually, compared to a lot of the people who don't like Series 8 and 9, love Series 10 because it's what drew them back in. But personally, Series 8 and 9 are my favourite, two of my favourite series ever, and I really love them. So I'm going to be very positive. The Matt Smith video went on for way too long, so I'm going to try and be a bit snappier about things. So I'm just going to get started with Deep Breath, which is good. I really like Deep Breath. I think it's a very good starting story for Peter Capaldi. I love the new opening credits, the new tone of the show. Capaldi is the real highlight here, though. I'm going to be saying the word Capaldi about a million times in every review. He is so good in this episode, straight off the bat. The sarcasm, the humour, that scene in the alleyway with the tramp, who framed me this face, all of his total, his post-regeneration craziness is just so much better than anyone else's. You know, there's none of the silly eating apples or just like claps, and he is full on jumping out of windows, abducting a horse, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. It's a very fun story. I like the return of the clockwork droids from Girl in the Fireplace. I think that's a nice little callback. Clara is pretty good. I like how it actually deals with something that the classic Who very rarely did, which was, oh, my best friend has just changed their entire face and personality. That would be a pretty jarring shift. And Russell T Davies threatened to deal with that in the Christmas Invasion when Rose got upset when Eccleston turned to Tennant, but actually it transpired she was just upset that Eccleston had left her, and as soon as Tennant walked out and gave her a wink and said, am I sexy, all of the issues with that dynamic was sorted. And I like that Series 8 really took its time to really deal with how weird a change that would be for someone, and Clara not being sure, and this Doctor being... Peter Capaldi's early stuff is basically what Colin Baker's arc should have been. He is a little bit untrustworthy, and he does things which are a little bit unsettling for the Doctor to do. And I think it's a brilliant way to frame a new Doctor, to really make the audience be unsure. But he's so good at the same time. I just love Capaldi. I said I wouldn't speak too long, but yeah. Into the Dalek is okay. Cool little concept. I think the Dalek action, this is really, really good, actually. Slightly forgettable guest cast. A Doctor, it's like a story written without Peter Capaldi really in mind, but there's some really great dark moments. I love the testing of Capaldi and Clara's dynamic. A lot of very fun lines, and it looks incredibly well done. But it's just not a story that I find myself coming back to all that often. It's just okay, in my opinion. Robot of Sherwood. I really don't care what anyone says. This is going in great. Yep. Yes, it is going in great. Higher than I put Power of the Daleks and stuff like that. I adore this story with every fibre of my being. This is the funniest Doctor Who story ever. Pure comedy delight. Capaldi, brilliant. Robin Hood and the inversion of that mythology, phenomenal. Jenna Coleman, absolute top of her game. Ben Miller as the Sheriff of Nottingham, great. Fun, bonkers story that for me is very Time Warrior-esque classic Who humour. Big, bombastic fun. It doesn't take itself seriously. I don't care that Robin Hood exists. I'm very glad that he does. People, seem to have some sort of bee in their bonnet about, oh, Robin Hood existing. This is just historically inaccurate. Well, when has Doctor Who ever been historically or scientifically accurate? It's a show about a man with a box that's bigger on the inside, and they go to all sorts of shenanigans, and they meet Agatha Christie, and she's being attacked by a wasp. But that's the sort of madness that this show just totally excels at, and it's possibly my favourite Mark Gatiss script. It's just a delight from start to finish. Spoon fighting, golden arrows. The scene in the cell with Robin and Capaldi is just brilliant, and their bickering makes this episode as good as it is. It's maybe not an objectively good plot, but I don't care because it's so fun and it keeps me invested and interested every single second of its runtime. Listen, absolute classic. Actually, put it in great there, but absolute. Oh man, this is. If you weren't hooked on Capaldi, you should have been by the end of this. That opening monologue is so good and so intense. And this entire premise is just unique. And you have, even if you don't like the way that the plot goes later on, you have to give this credit for just being so unique and so totally out of place with everything else that Doctor Who has ever created. The villain of the piece is paranoia. And it's a script that gives us a lot of questions, but actually doesn't give us a lot of answers. And the script's a lot better because it does not give us the answers. So many great moments peppered all throughout this episode. Beautiful playing around with time travel concepts. Our final flashback to the War Doctor. Clara, I know people have an issue because, oh, Clara's underneath the Doctor's bed and it's Clara being inserted into the Doctor's timeline again. And I get that, but it's just such an incredible moment. And I love the Fear Makes Companions of Us All speech. Danny Pink and Clara, and the way that their relationship is done in this episode is fine. It's probably the weaker element, but it's still enjoyable. I just love the bonkers, weird mood in this story, and it just feels totally unlike anything that we've seen before or saw afterwards. The Capaldi era was, for me, particularly Series 8 and 9, were the most experimental Doctor Who ever got with its concepts, with its ideas, and there's a couple of examples of that. Series 10 was much more by the numbers, but Series 8 and 9 really pushed the limits of what Doctor Who could be, and this is one of the prime examples of that. Time Heist. Good, could push into great. I'll put in good. I really, really enjoyed Time Heist. I know I'm just saying the same thing over and over again. Great concept, the music and the editing, the direction and all that is sublime. It really feels totally separate from anything else that we've ever seen before. 12 and Clara, absolutely amazing again. They put together a team of cyberpunk hackers with Sai and Sabra, and they are both a great team and a great laugh. It pushes all of our character dynamics. Again, Series 8 just did this incessantly, episode to episode. It pushed the Doctor and Clara's relationship every single week, and that is one of its real strengths. It brings, I love when the Doctor and the companion don't see eye to eye and just romantically gaze at one another, but actively disagree, because the Doctor is a very much, well, in Series 8 is very greater good. He's like, well, they're going to die, but this is about saving us, and that's the priority now. And Clara's not being able to get her head around this new mindset from our Time Lord, and it's a very good plot. And basically, the twist of the monster at the end is basically Hyde's, but done way better. Keely Hawes is brilliant. Just a great, fun tone in this whole episode. It's one of those ones I will just stick on and watch anytime. In fact, a lot of Series 8 is. I have a real soft spot for a lot of these episodes. The Caretaker. Okay. This is, on paper, utter rubbish. In practice, it's actually quite fun. And there are some very simple reasons for that. The comedy in this episode is very strong. Sorry, I know, it's a Gareth Roberts script. I'm praising it again, but that's just how it is. The episode, I think, is pretty decent. There's a lot to enjoy about the character interactions and about 12 going undercover, and again pushing the dynamics and Clara and Danny and what this means for their relationship. but the villain is the serious detractor, and the reason why. Robot of Sherwood is elevated by its comedy, but it also has a decent plot to be elevated. This is just comedy and a really rubbish villain who is kind of pointless. The Robox Blitzer, who looks rubbish and is of no real threat. But I'm definitely enjoying how the Missy arc is being put into the series at this point. It's one of my favorite series arcs ever. Terrible. Gilman is terrible. I got nothing new original to say about this. The moon is an egg. I know that you're supposed to have your science fantasy brain on and not taken. I know I just said the science shouldn't be taken seriously, but it's still stupid because the moon is an egg and that weird dragon bursts from the moon, and then conveniently enough, it lays another moon egg the same size as, bigger than itself. Not the same size, bigger than it lays an egg bigger than itself. What? Courtney Woods is in this. She's annoying and kind of pointless, and why is she even there? The Doctor, although I like his constant unpredictability, the fact that he just leaves them there when he knows that the moon is an egg and he knows that it's all going to be harmless and fine, and he says, oh, it's not my decision, I'll leave it to the humans. When has leaving the life of an innocent, defenseless creature in the hands of humans ever been a good idea? Did you not? You were there on Starship UK when they strapped a whale to the bottom of a nation. You can't let humans decide anything. It just feels too out of character. It's not just unpredictable, it's out of character for the Doctor to just be like, you know what, the humans will be fine with this, and to just up and leave them. The only saving grace of this episode is Jenna Coleman. Well, I mean, Capaldi is good when he's on screen as well, but the main saving grace of this entire story is Jenna Coleman's performance at the end. Honestly, she's earned a BAFTA at the end of that. The performance in that final standoff with Capaldi. And it really pushed their dynamic to its extreme, but I still hate it because it's boring and the moon is an egg, and I'm not getting around that. Maui and the Orient Express. Great, joyful. Honestly, could push into absolute classic. It's so good. Jamie Mathewson should have been made showrunner. His scripts in the Capaldi era were consistently some of the best every single series. He wrote Mummy and the Orient Express, he wrote Flatline, he wrote The Girl Who Died, which isn't one of the standouts, and then he wrote Oxygen. He was clearly a brilliant writer, and he got this show, and this is a perfect episode to demonstrate the 12th Doctor's unpredictable but lovable character, fun, sarcastic. The plot is big and bonkers, but it's dark, and it actually adds weight to the people that the Doctor allows to die. We get to meet our sidecast before they get killed off and get to meet them and become attached to them. And the difference between the PTSD-ridden soldier and how he deals with the mummy, the Foretold, and how the scientist who'd always wanted to see it deals with it, is so great. And Perkins, played by Frank Skinner, is the best companion that the show never had. I really wish that we had some time with Capaldi and Perkins. They were so good on screen. Foretold's just a genius idea. In fact, this whole script is just a very great concept for a Doctor Who episode. Orient Express in space, a mummy attacking passengers. You got 66 seconds to live, and I love that little timer in the bottom of the screen. Just the different directional things that was being done with the show at this point. Beautiful ending scene as well. Sometimes the only choices you have are bad ones, but you still have to choose. And I think the Doctor's recklessness really being a negative, because he knew it was going to be dangerous. He didn't know, but he certainly hoped. It's just some really great stuff going on. I love this episode. I also love, almost in equal measure, Flatline. I'll put it just behind Mummy and the Orient Express, but Flatline is just great as well. I've just got to say it's so good. Fun concept. It's basically a Dr. Light story, which lets Jenna Coleman be the lead actress, and that really works. I think she really plays that Doctor role really well. I like the cast. I just love the concept and it's a very well realized concept. That's what I was trying to say. The CGI is great on the things. I love all the comedy stuff with the 12th Doctor stuck in the little TARDIS and everything that brings. But it's kind of all about the man who stops the monster speech. When the 12th Doctor actually does show up, and Clara has been able to... Clara's actually shown a lot of the ingenuity that would define her character in Series 9. When she has to become the Doctor, when she's pushed, she really is a phenomenal companion. And his man who stops the monster speech is his big "I'm the Doctor" moment. It's so good. I love this episode. Series 8 comes to a slightly grinding halt in the Forest of the Night, right? I'll say this for it. It's not as bad as a lot of people make out. It is not, however, even remotely good. I find it okay. No, not okay. It's sort of, I can watch it, and it's not. The terrible column is almost reserved for stuff that's painful to watch, that you don't want to claw your own eyes out. This is just, why did you make this? What is the message of this? Trees, don't cut down trees, is that the message? What is the weird message about not giving children who've got mental illnesses medication? What is that about? What is most of the stuff about? Why can she see this? Why is her daughter, her sister hiding in some trees? I don't have an issue with the trees popping up and the plot resolving itself if there was an actual interesting story to be told, but there's not. A forest springs up, the Doctor runs around it for 45 minutes, then goes back to his TARDIS and watches as the trees defend the Earth. Bad child acting, yeah, textbook. Honestly, if this was in the Russell T Davies era, like a lot of the episodes that get slagged off in Capaldi's era, if it was in the Russell T Davies era, it would be loved a lot more. It would probably not be seen as much of a problem if it was in the Russell T Davies era. But it's just not good. I cannot, with a straight face, tell you that I think this is a good episode. Capaldi's good. Clara's good. That's kind of it. Dark Water. Immense. Sublime first part. 45 minutes, perfect emotional acting, perfect dramatic acting. The series arc, all culminating and coming together. Danny's death at the beginning. The volcano scene, so good. All the dialogue. 12, forgiving Clara immediately. Do you think that I care for you so little that betraying you would make a difference? His kindness really coming in full. I know some people have an issue with that. Why did the Doctor forgive her? Well, sod you. It's perfect and in character for both of them. How much their dynamic is pushed to its, I know I said it's extreme before, but it's beyond its extreme. This is the breaking point. Missy's reveal, the Cybermen reveal, the idea, the concept of don't cremate me is horrifying. And the idea that Cybermen want to upgrade the dead is a very good concept. Even though I don't like the Cybermen design, for me, not the Cybers one, I don't like that one either. Even though I don't like the Nightmare and Silver Cyberman design that we've still got, for me, this is a return to form for the first time since Rise of the Cybermen that we've really been taking body horror into it. And the cyber hands coming out of the graves, actually that's next part, but the don't cremate me idea, the nether sphere, all that stuff. This is big concept stuff, and I think it's perfectly acted by everyone. It's a phenomenal piece of television. Everyone who was involved in writing it, making it, producing it, directing it should be proud. It looks incredible. I believe it's the first Rachel Talalay episode. Literally every episode she directs she spent the whole time just gawping at the screen because of how beautiful it looks. Death in Heaven is great, but it's not up to Dark Water's standards, and it's a serious tone shift from the first gothic horror part to a more traditional Russell T Davies era, all Cybermen taking over the world kind of story. But it doesn't go too far there. There's still a bit of body horror. I actually like the Cyber Brigadier. I salute him every time. Michelle Gomez is brilliant. I love the Nethersphere. I love Peter Capaldi falling from the plane and doing the controlled dive. That is just so John Pertwee. If John Pertwee's era had the budget, he would 100% have done that. Just a really great, fun end to series 8 that perfectly ties up all the character arcs, and those final scenes between Clara and Danny. I should have mentioned in Dark Water, I love the final addition to Danny's backstory, and him sending the child back is a great final bit for him. And I love the scene between Capaldi and Clara with the never trust the hug and them both lying to each other. Would it have been a fitting ending? Well, yeah, probably, but I'm glad it wasn't. And that's not the last time I will be saying that, because Last Christmas is next. One of my favourite Christmas specials of all. Santa. Big, bold dream sequences, great guest cast, Capaldi totally at ease in this role. The 12 and Clara stuff is great. I love the cop-out ending. Not cop-out, I love the fake-out ending with Clara, the old Clara. It would have been a beautiful ending, but honestly, I'm so happy that it wasn't her final bit, because that final scene when that piece of Marigold music plays, I think it's called Every Christmas is Last Christmas, and he takes her in the TARDIS. I get chills every time. It's just gorgeous, and this whole episode is just brilliant, feel good, but very sad at the same time. The stuff done with Capaldi, not with Capaldi, with Clara and Danny in the dream sequence, it's just next level. It's actually better than anything done between them in Series 8. It's dark, it's scary, and it's funny and heartwarming and Christmassy, and it's easily one of the ones of the Christmas specials that I could just sit down and just enjoy. Such a good episode. Nick Frost is good fun as Santa as well, with Dan Starkey playing one of the elves, which is a nice little. The Magician's Apprentice. I feel like I'm taking way too long on this again. The Magician's Apprentice. What are we doing with you? Here? Yeah, I think that's fair. This is a great two-parter. I really enjoy. In fact, I'll just do both for Series 9. I'll try and speed things up by doing both of them at once. I think The Witch is Familiar is marginally better. So Magician's Apprentice is a good, fun first part, but it's not focused enough on its story to be a true great. Whilst The Witch is Familiar does a few things that I don't like, which is basically what's keeping it from being higher up the list, but it's the Davros Doctor stuff is so good. I need to talk about Magician's Apprentice. The cold open on that is the greatest cold open of all time. I kind of don't hate any of the guitar playing, tank riding stuff. I love the Clara Missy dynamic and unit and the time stop. Magician's Apprentice's problem is it just takes too long to actually get going, and that's the reason why it's not in a higher tier. The Witch is Familiar has a few problems. I don't really have an issue with Daryl's opening his eyes, to be honest. Maybe a little bit, but I have a couple of slight nitpicks that stop it being an even greater story. But the Davros Doctor conversations and discussions are so good. It's the most perfect end for those two. I don't know if I hope it will be the end. I mean, I would be happy to see Davros again, but I feel like it was the perfect close for those characters, having those final conversations and really focusing in on the dialogue and the content of those conversations. And Capaldi and Julian Bleach just utterly nail those performances. A lot of Dalek fan service, Missy and Clara being great again. I just have a couple of slight nitpicks keeping it out of an even greater tier. Once again, with Before the Flood and Under the Lake. I would put Under the Lake, which is the first part, there, just above Last Christmas, and I'll put Before the Flood just there because it's a slightly lesser second part. This is Space Under Siege as a formula, feeling fresh, and the characters feeling vibrant and bright, and all the ideas just feel fresh and new. And this is just a brilliantly paced plot. The two-part idea in Series 9, I always have been supportive of more two-parters. I think it's a great idea, and it was done really well here. I love the time jumping, and the Under the Lake is a great first part with a great guest cast with the ghosts, and it slowly reveals all the little parts of its plot before a actually great cliffhanger, even though the Doctor being dead is just a Stephen Moffat trope at this point. And Before the Flood is great. I love that cold open with the guitar playing and this art. I love the sonic sunglasses. I don't care what anyone says. And the sunglasses and them going back and all those interesting ideas about time travel and about bootstrap paradoxes and them going back and actually watching themselves going back because they're stuck in a loop and they have to watch O'Donnell and they can't save her even though they know that she's going to die. And the Fisher King is great and his interactions with the Doctor are really brilliant. And back on the base, there's a lot of very well played horror stuff. I love the scene with Cass walking. Cass is the deaf character and walking away, and she can't hear the ghost dragging the axe, and then she feels the vibrations on the floor and ducks right just the right moment. The tension in that scene is so good. Capaldi and Clara, again, they've been brilliant. I really enjoy this one. Series 9 is a big favourite for me, and it's a really great episode. The Girl Who Died. Okay, Moffat and Matthewson. It's not strong by their standards, but it's a fairly decent episode. I love the scene where Capaldi realises what he got space for, where he got space from, and what it's for. Not just for seeing Ten and Donna again, and those Fires of Pompeii references, but the speech that accompanies it. And the vulnerability in that scene that he displays as well, which is kind of rare for his Doctor at this stage, but also shows that when he's emotional, he can make some serious mistakes. And that is kind of part of the whole Series 9's narrative leading up to the hybrid at the end. Maisie Williams is good fun. This whole script is actually a very good fun. It's a kind of a basic premise. I've seen it done in Merlin in the episode The Moment of Truth, where they go and they arm the villagers against Kanan and his men, and the Musketeers have an episode, Homecoming, where the exact same thing happens. And now Doctor Who is an episode where they have to arm these villagers to fight. Lots of shows have done it. It's very basic, but it's fun and witty to keep my interest for the really good stuff, which is that final segment at the end, and then that cliffhanger or the world turning around Ashilda. I'm not sure if I'm a big fan of where Ashilda's story actually went, but it's a great concept. The Woman Who Lived, bad. Yeah, Below in the Forest of the Night. I know this feels a little bit harsh because Capaldi and Maisie Williams are pretty good. I like Rufus Hound. Is it in this? He's pretty good fun. There's a bit of banter, but honestly, I find this story just so forgettable. In the middle of Series 9, where most stories have something incredibly notable about them, this just feels like, oh yeah, that one that we just sort of had a weird lion guy from Hades. Lots of ideas that don't really feel fleshed out. I like the stuff done with Ashilda and her past and the consequences of the Doctor's actions, but it kind of doesn't go into it as hard as I would like it to. And it never really gives a satisfactory answer as to why the Doctor just can't take her or fix her or whatever. The stuff when he's reading her diary after she'd lost her child, that stuff's brilliant. But again, the plot with the lion guy. The lion guy looks stupid and the lion guy's plot is stupid. And I've just got no interest in watching this one, to put it mildly. The Zygon invasion just pushes into, good. Just pushes into good. Yeah, it's a pretty good episode. I love the cliffhanger with evil Clara. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on here. Kate Stewart, Osgood, that cold open is brilliant. The messaging is actually very interesting, and it's a nuanced subject to explore the ideas of radicalization and all these things. They're far more interesting than people always talk about how political Series 11 and 12 has become, but the messaging is so simple. Rose's messaging is racism bad, Orphan 55, global warming bad, Praxeus, plastics bad. This is taking a political subject And it's an interesting, nuanced debate with a lot of layers to be peeled away. And I really like that. What I don't like as much is what has been done with the Zygons and how they get their powers and that kind of stuff. That kind of grates on me a little bit, and that's probably what is detracting from the episode. And the same problems plague the second part, the Zygon inversion. But it has one of the greatest speeches in the history of television from Peter Capaldi. This is so good. His performance in this is incredible. If you had any doubts about him being the best actor to ever take this role on, watch this speech again. Man alive, it's sublime. Every bit of the performance, the emotion, the drama, everything about it. It totally, I mean, it would have been, the Zygon 2-part would have been pretty good. But this elevates it. This is the reason why everyone remembers this story. For this speech and its utter preachiness, and I don't care that it's preachy. I really do not give a toss. It's perfectly written, perfectly acted. I just wish they hadn't had the throwaway line about that's what you said the last 17 times, because it kind of cheapens it, in my opinion. And I love the final scenes with Osgood, when it almost feels like I'd love to see Osgood again, but it feels like if we don't, that's the perfect end, with the Doctor saying, and by the way, I'm a big fan. That's just great. I really love that. And Jenna Coleman puts in a great performance in this as well. Basic rule of the Capaldi era, him and Jenna Coleman will be on top of their game every single week, even if you don't like what the characters themselves are actually doing. Sleep No More. I have nothing interesting to say about this, nothing whatsoever, other than why did you make the dullest episode of the show about sleep? The found footage style gives me a headache. It's just not interesting. There's not much witty dialogue. It's Gatiss' weakest script. It's dull, it's boring, the guest cast are forgettable, the villains are stupid. And there's this really cool concept about a society, a capitalist society that doesn't let their workers sleep and has developed a machine that prevents them to sleep, and it does nothing with it. The machine just makes a monster. Total skip this one. We're just waiting for the good stuff. And the good stuff does come. Face the Raven. Great. Oh, can I just say that there are 3 pieces of Murray Gold music, which are like a holy trinity. There is The Greatest Story Never Told, there's The Shepherd's Boy, and there's Face the Raven, which is one that nobody ever talks about. Beautiful, beautiful score on this episode, and that track from this Series 9 soundtrack is just the most beautiful thing I've ever listened to. It's the perfect end for Clara, and it kind of should have been the end. I'm not going to slag off Hellbent the way everyone else does. I actually quite like Hellbent, but my biggest gripe with Hellbent is that they brought Clara back. Such a gorgeous ending. It's such a heart-wrenching, heart-throbbing, gut-wrenching, that's what I was going for. Heartbreaking, gut-wrenching death. And the scene where you see the Raven go inside it and she's screaming, Riggsy coming back, is nice and fun, and there's a lot of cool concepts. But then, like 10 minutes to go, it just breaks your heart. The silent rage from the 12th Doctor when he's threatening a shielder is just incredible. But also his total vulnerability, and there's no crying. There is no Tennant theatrics. I always think of these 2 scenes. This scene versus the scene after the 10th Doctor has lost Jenny after she's been shot, and he's pointing the gun at that guy's head, and he's going, and he's breathing, and you can really see the anger pulsing. And it's slight overacting, but I do quite like it. But this is the total opposite. This is so subtle and underplayed. Capaldi's face can say a million words. And this is just a beautiful ending and a beautiful setup for the finale and a heartbreaking death for Companion. I went into my brother's room a couple of months ago and found him just sobbing his eyes out to this episode. And fair enough, this is really rough stuff. But I wouldn't change a single second of it because it leads into the greatest piece of Doctor Who ever. And that's a cliche at this point. I don't care that it's a cliche. Heaven Sent is the greatest piece of Doctor Who ever. And that's just a fact, guys. 55 minutes with one actor, and that so just so happens to be the greatest lead actor that's ever been in this show. I would argue maybe one of the greatest actors who's ever been in this show, written by the greatest writer who's ever written for the show, writing his greatest ever script. It includes the greatest ever composer for the show, Murray Gold, with his greatest ever musical score, featuring his greatest ever piece, The Shepherd's Boy, and directed by Rachel Talalay, who's the show's greatest ever director. And this is her greatest ever achievement as director. This is perfect, absolutely everything. The direction, the music, the imagery, the cinematography, the Doctor jumping out of a window and then just going into his mind palace, and this very complex look into how the Doctor's mind actually works, the exploration of grief, the veil, and the sense of hopelessness that just prevails throughout this entire story, particularly when he's been killed by the veil because he's refused to let his final secret in. He's just crawling along the floor and his face is all blooded, and I get horrible chills every time he says all you need for energy is something to burn, and you see him plugging his decaying body in and preparing to burn it for energy. Hopelessness, and then he just keeps doing that again, and you're going, why? This is awful. Why am I watching that? And then you see he's getting a little bit closer in that wall every single time. 1 billion years into the future, 2 billion years, 4.5 billion years, and then he steps through, punches through the wall, and we arrive in Gallifrey. Honestly, I would not change a second of this. This is classic Who, new Who, Big Finish, comics, novels, nothing compares to this. This is my favourite piece of Doctor Who ever. It is beautiful and perfect. Hellbent. What am I going to do with you? What am I going to do with you? Yeah. It is deeply flawed, and I understand some people's gripes with it, but it looks beautiful, and the first 30 minutes with the Doctor on Gallifrey deposing Rassilon, like, that is great. Some of the stuff in the Sisterhood of Khan is great. I even don't mind them bringing Clara back to talk to the Doctor, and the Doctor trying to go too far, but she should have had to go back to Trap Street at the end of the episode. The sort of melancholic, happy ending that she gets when she gets to go off on the universe, no, that's the only real massive drag on this episode. The thing that really is knocking it down from being a really great episode that I think it should be, and I think it's the overwhelming thing that sticks in a lot of people's brains, is that moment. I really love the Gallifrey stuff. I really love the Doctor going too far. I love the idea of what the hybrid actually is, but she should have had to go back to Trap Street, or else they should just not have brought her back whatsoever, because it undermines her death, in my opinion. I don't know if that's controversial or what. Well, I don't think it is. I think a lot of people feel that way. It is a very good episode. I think it's a decent finale, but I understand why people are disappointed, particularly because it came after Heaven Sent, which makes it quite likely to disappoint people. What we got next? We have The Husbands of River Song, which I'm putting in good, just below time heist, fun, camp, ridiculous, actually the best camp story ever. Russell Davies may have made his era very camp, but I generally didn't like it. This is just fun, and maybe it just gives Capaldi a chance to really have a laugh and a really weird, bonkers story. The river stuff's great. I love their final moments together. A lot of just top-notch stuff going on in this episode. I love that the Hello Sweetie after her big speech, and those final 15 minutes are just gorgeous. And Murray Gold's score for, you know what I'm on about, Murray Gold's score for the Singing Towers of Darillium. And just, it feels like, again, this is another person. Do not bring River back. It's the perfect close for her story. And they both lived happily ever after. And they both lived happily. It's really, really lovely, feel-good story, particularly after the emotional downer of Series 9's final 3 episodes. It feels like a joyous romp, and I have a lot of affection for that episode. Here comes your controversial episode for Tonight We Might Die, which is class. And I kind of like having the spin-offs on these lists because it gives me a chance to really flex my controversial opinions a little bit. I really like For Tonight We Might Die. Class as a whole, as a show, was not great, and I will admit that. But I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the characters, and honestly, it deserved a second series because Torchwood Series 1 is worse than Class Series 1. Class's first series never fell to the same lows as Torchwood's first series. It possibly didn't have the same highs, but it definitely did not have the same lows. But I really like For Tonight We Might Die. Between that episode and the episode Detained are the two episodes that I think really show the strength of this series and what the series could have been. It's a great start for all of our characters. A nice starting place. I love Mrs. Quill and April and Ram and all those characters. I think they're all very well introduced. It's quite gory, it's quite brutal, and Capaldi steals the show within the 5 minutes he's there. Honestly, it might just be a good episode of Class, but if you're taking Capaldi into the equation, you're looking at great. I really do enjoy this one. I think it's a lot of fun and a great pilot for an unfortunately short-lived show that deserved a second series every bit as much as any other Doctor Who spin-off ever did, because both Sarah Jane Adventures and Torchwood have weak first series and they didn't really catch their stride to their second series. So Class deserved that extra time. Yeah, I talk too much. Return of Dr. Mysterio. There. Some people hate it, some people love it. It's total Marmite. I'm in the love camp. Superheroes, fun, meta humor, great guest cast. Nardal's return. I didn't really like him in Husbands of Ever Song. He's great here. Not quite as good as he was in Series 10, but he's getting there. Capaldi is top notch. This is really Series 10 Capaldi. It feels like there's a very distinct iteration of the 12th Doctor that turns up after Hellbent, that's a little bit more somber, but not as evasive, not as mysterious as the Series 8 one who didn't know who he was, but not as fun and Agent Rockstar as the Series 9 one. Just a more somber middle ground that I think is probably my favourite type of the 12th Doctor's character. Really great, fun premise with a fun and interesting and actually good plan. The Doctor points that out. You know, that's a good plan. Plans are my thing. I'm saying you that is a good plan. And the Harmony Shoal are a great set of villains. I really don't understand what your problem with this episode would be. Yes, superheroes, it's silly, but I'm having too much fun to actually care. I think this is definitely one of the ones I could just sit down and watch and enjoy. And the whole thing looks gorgeous. Whoever directed it, fair play, because it really does look great. The pilot. Good. Okay, this is where my Series 10, my lack of enthusiasm for Series 10. I love Series 8. I adore Series 9. And Series 10 I find good, but a little bit safe in places. The pilot is one that I really enjoy. It's got Heather and Bill. It's got a really gorgeous looking. The whole Series 10 is just immense looking, and the music, this is great. It's a fun introduction to the new tone of the show, this new brand of the 12th Doctor with Nardal and a new type of companion. Everything feels fresh and brand new, far more fresh than it has felt at any point during the Chibnall era. This is a soft reboot for the show, and it's fun and enjoyable, and I really like the pilot. I have a lot of time for that episode. Smile. Okay, I have very little to say about Smile, because Series 10, a lot of it is just fine, but not particularly memorable, and Smile sort of falls into that bracket. I like the first half of it. It's very adventure-based, but also, at the end of the day, it's a very slow-paced story. And as soon as it feels like we should be moving into the second part, the story abruptly resolves by the Doctor turning the system on and off again. The Doctor gets really upset with the humans for being annoyed that all their relatives have been brutally murdered or something. Ralph Little is totally wasted, even though he is totally a character who should have had a much bigger role, an actor who should have had a much bigger role in this series. But it's inoffensive. It's okay in the extreme as an episode for me. It has nothing particularly of interest. Thin Ice. Yeah, it's good. It's a very good companion piece. I did say for The Beast Below, when I was talking about that in the Matt Smith video, that I feel like a doctor and companion should be tested very early on in the run, in terms of their dynamic, and the companion seeing that new darker side to the doctor, or the more vulnerable side, whatever. This is that episode. Bill really cuts to the heart of the 12th Doctor, and his the scenes between those two are just sublime. The Doctor punching a racist is euphoric. There is a lot of good fun stuff going on here. The plot is kind of just there with the big fish under the Thames, but it's all about the historical setting and the Doctor companion dynamic and those interactions. You know, have you ever seen anyone die before? How many? And don't tell me that you can't remember. It's just so good. Knock knock. Can I pick it up? Thanks. Lovely of you. Just Below the Girl Who Died. This is another one that in series 10, which is just I enjoy, but it's just kind of there. Haunted house stuff is okay, pretty effective. Bill's flatmates kind of forgettable, most of them. 12 totally violating the teacher-student boundaries. I mean, a bit awkward 12 dancing a little mix, not something I ever needed to see etched on my brain. It's okay. I'm not sure if I like the final twist with the wooden lady and her son. I think it would be better if it was just the landlord who was doing it for his own purposes, particularly with the themes of capitalism that run through that series. Oxygen. Okay. This is good stuff. This is really good stuff. Under the Lake. Between Under the Lake and The Last Christmas, that seems fair. Brilliant, brilliant episode. The first real great of series 10. Total breath of fresh air of a plot. Methuselah is great. It looks at the episode at the beginning of the episode like, oh, it's going to be space zombies, but then it's actually a very nuanced, interesting portrayal of capitalism. We take Nardole, who completes the dynamic and makes it totally perfect between Bill and 12th Doctor. There's actual stakes, and the Doctor is left blind by the events of this episode. Bill nearly dies. It's huge in stakes and scale, and it's just really, really brilliant. That's all I've got. It really is. It's great. And the good run continues because I adore Extremis. Such a good script. Brilliant concept. Beautifully executed. The monks, all the subtle little details that the world that we are in is not real, such as the TARDIS not translating the Italian accents in the Vatican because it's obviously not the real TARDIS. All these tiny little details that suddenly add up later on. The Doctor having to go through the entire plot blind and not being able to see. And when the whole point of the thing is he has to read this article which has made scientists and the religious both kill themselves, and what secret could possibly live up to that premise? And the answer is actually really, really good. This is so, it honestly could go an absolute classic, but the other two parts of the Monk trilogy are just so dull by comparison that it kind of feels like the ideas set up here were never properly paid off. The Doctor just sort of loses in this story, and you know, he does get a victory of sorts because he's able to, but it's just the preparation for the actual invasion. Unfortunately, the actual Monk invasion is rubbish, but here they are so good, such a creepy and effective villain. And the flashbacks to Missy and revealing that Missy's in the box halfway through the series was a great way to do the series arc, because it allowed series 10 to have basically two arcs. There's who's in the box, and then the box, the vault, who's in the vault, and then it's about Missy's character and can Missy become good, which is one of the most compelling story arcs we've ever had. And I love all the scenes with between Missy and the Doctor and Nardole turning up at the execution. Virtue is only virtue in extremis. Such a great episode. I really love this one. Unfortunately, none of the rest of the Monk trilogy can actually live up to its potential. The Pyramid at the End of the World, I'll put above Smile. Yeah, I think it's okay. I mean, I don't remember much about it, which I think it says all there is to do. I like how the Armageddon has not been brought about by any big means, and the monks are not doing it. They're just going to help us avert it only if we give them their consent, and that it's not going to be caused by a big nuclear war or whatever, but actually just by a couple of scientists doing stupid stuff and ordinary mistakes leading to that. 12 and Nardole get some of their best dialogue. There's some good stuff, but I don't think they should have cured the Doctor's blindness. And it kind of just feels like a lot of talking and talking and talking, and then Bill lets the monks take over the entire planet, and that's kind of it. So I have issues, but most of my issues just totally come at the front of this. There's a Series 8, a Series 9, and a Series 10 in the Terrible Box. Each Capaldi series has one episode that is difficult to view without wanting to kill someone. And Series 10 is The Lie of the Land. How? Why do they not bother with the monks? Why is this dystopian world that we're in for 15 minutes so interesting and then just totally abandoned and not seen again? Why did we trick Bill into shooting the Doctor? Why did the Doctor need Bill to shoot him? Why is it implied that she actually murdered him and then he just fake out regenerated? Why? Why did they come up with a perfectly good and interesting way to solve the plot and then proceed to have that plan fail so Bill's mum just saves the day? Why are we doing that? Why does everyone just totally forget about absolutely everything? Monk statues everywhere, guys. Why are we not? Why is there no consequences? Why is there nothing interesting happening all episode? Why is it so big in scale and yet so dull? Nothing happens. I'm annoyed. Actually, it could be worse than Kill the Moon. Yeah, it's a crime of a script. Honestly, Toby Whithouse is such a good writer, and I really hope that this is not his final script, because he had a pretty much flawless track record before this. So bad. It's just so bad. Empress of Mars is, for me, the lesser of the two Mark Gatiss Ice Warrior stories, which I understand is a bit controversial because a lot of people really love Empress of Mars. I find it fun, nice bit of colonialism on Mars, British Empire being contrasted with the Ice Warriors' own brand of empire and colonialism, and I love seeing the British soldiers on Mars, and all that stuff is very interesting. The Ice Warriors are pretty good. There's some interesting depictions of Cardus, but a lot of the episode is just kind of there. It's fun enough. It's kind of Alpha Centauri turns up. Oh man, I was so happy. So good. That was just such a great little twist. It's a fan servicey little script, but it's ultimately a plot that I find kind of forgettable. Ears of Light also is an okay. I enjoyed it more this time. Shona Monroe, who wrote Survival, it feels kind of classic-ish, which I kind of enjoy, but I don't know, something's just a little bit off. This is possibly the most forgettable Doctor Who episode ever. I called Smile that, didn't I? Just not a lot happens in this one. I think the stuff between Bill and the Fourth Legion, or whatever they're called, is a bit heavy-handed in its, hey, look, that used to be all the Fourth Legion or the 12th Legion, whatever they're called, are all revealed to be LGBT as well. And it's, hey, look, the society's always been like this, and it's all a little bit heavy-handed. And I hate the stuff with crows saying "caw" as a tribute to that girl, and the fact that crows used to speak, but they don't just that stuff's just guff. We can ignore that. Nardole in that dressing gown is the highlight of the episode. In fact, the highlight of the episode is the scene at the end with Missy and the 12th Doctor when she's crying. And she says, every day I remember more people I killed. I don't even know why I'm crying. Such a great scene. But in general, this episode is just kind of there. And it's kind of just filler as we wait for a finale which was worth every second of the wait. Can I talk about this now? Put this in there. Wildlife and Time and the Doctor Falls is the greatest finale in Doctor Who. And I am taking nothing against that. Unbelievable television. No finale has ever topped this. The first part, which is a creepy claustrophobic horror story with this changing time travel narrative that looks incredible. The stuff done with the Cybermen in that episode is so good. Honestly brings back all the body horror. It's everything I've ever wanted from a Cyberman story. The John Sim reveal, perfect. Some of us didn't have that spoiled for us by BBC promotional material, so we can enjoy it as it was. So brilliant, brilliantly done. I love the new design of the Cybermen, which is very much like the 10th Planet, but just a little bit more refined, and is my personal favourite Cyberman design ever. What happens to Bill in this episode is horrific. Genius idea with a time dilation, using that as a weapon against the Doctor. Just an incredible plot. And then the Doctor Falls subverts our expectations, and it becomes this emotional powerhouse of a story with great moments for every single character. Missy's arc comes full circle because she has to face off against a previous iteration of herself, a version of herself, which is so cruel and menacing. And John Sim is absolutely at his best. I was never a huge fan of his performances in the Tennant era, largely because of the stupid stuff that Rusty Davies used to make him do. Man alive, is he brilliant here. So cruel and vile. And just the concept of the Master dying, well, in this case, Missy dying, shot in the back by a future iteration, by a past iteration of himself. A past iteration, mind. The Master has always been obsessed with living constantly and never dying. And the fact that he would rather die than stand with the Doctor, he would rather kill a future version of himself than ever have to go through the humiliation of that, is perfect. And Missy's laughter, and this is our perfect end. We shoot ourselves in the back. And that, you know, she dies without witness, without reward. It's the only way to truly do good things. Virtue is only virtue in extremis. Such a great ending, and Bill's ending and Nardal's endings are gorgeous. And the 12th Doctor, oh man alive, that speech about kindness and all those little subtle interactions with all the characters, with Missy and the Master, with Nardal and his goodbye with him, with Bill, you know, when she says, you know, you said you could save me. Were you lying? No. Were you right? No. And it's just so heartbreaking. And then his determination to save these group of children. This is the episode that defines who the Doctor is as a character. I'm just rambling. Phenomenal piece of television. Phenomenal. Should it have been his finale? Maybe. Should it have been his regeneration story? I mean, maybe. But I'm always going to be happy that we got Twice Upon a Time, because I really actually like Twice Upon a Time, and I really don't care what you say about that. Yes, the First Doctor stuff annoys me, as it annoys everyone, and the sexist First Doctor stuff is just pointless, and I think it should have been totally cut out of the plot. And I don't care that there is not a plot in this episode. There's no bad guy. This is a Doctor who has just lost everything. You know, people talk about Tennant losing everything. He's just lost Bill, Nardal, Clara, River, and now Missy. He thinks he's lost the battle with her as well. He has lost absolutely everything, and now he's dying. And this is a Doctor who doesn't want to regenerate, not for some Tennant vanity reasons, but because he's tired and he wants to just rest. The dialogue in this is just so good. The music is so good. Richard Kelly's direction is so good. There are so many beautiful moments. Even the stuff of the First Doctor, which I don't like a lot of it. The bit when he's talking with Bill about why he left Gallifrey is just sublime. It's perfect stuff. I love all the little fan servicey stuff, like the 10th Planet previously on Doctor Who, 709 episodes ago. Or was it 709? That seems like a lot. Yeah, or seeing the classic Time Vortex, which is totally new. It wasn't used in the classic series like that. Just looks utterly gorgeous, and they should have kept it for Whittaker's era. It's so great. The final moments, that final scene on the battlefield when he gets his memories of Clara back, and when he's hugging Bill and Nardole. Thank you, both of you, for everything you were to me. And then they vanish in his arms, and he leaves the battlefield. A life this long, it's a battlefield like this one, and it's empty because everyone else has fallen. And this story is not a Doctor has to defeat big bad. It's just the Doctor gets his faith in the universe restored by a plot, which isn't a nasty, negative thing. It's actually a nice idea that someone's come up with to save people, basically, and he doesn't know what to do when it's not an evil plan. And his final scenes are just incredible. That final speech in the TARDIS, and given that, you know, what the Doctor should be, and it feels perfectly right that him, a Doctor who had come so far from being someone who didn't know whether he was a good man or not, to be just telling the next Doctor, right, you listen up. This is what I've learned. This is what the Doctor is and should be. And above all, be kind. That's the message that he's learned throughout this whole era. And I will say definitively, Peter Capaldi is the Doctor in my eyes. He is my favourite Doctor of all time. I never thought that would happen when I was originally watching it, because Matt Smith was my original Doctor. No one was ever going to beat him. This is just the best. I love Peter Capaldi. I love his era. I love his companions. And they deserve more love from the fandom at large. Well, I'm going to try and go now before I just speak about how much I love this era forever. Jodie Whittaker next. That's going to be fun. Yikes.